The program we used to stream decided to just stop working for a while. Hopefully this one works out. We're going to jump right back in with Gary. Take it away.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Ben. Good afternoon, everyone. So as Ben was saying, this month we're looking at Wausau through some photography, some efforts to capture the history of Wausau in 5 weeks, perhaps in 5 epochs. Or 5 eras. So the era that we're going to be talking about today is basically the era from 1880 up through about 1917. That time when the railroads were here, and am I being muted?
No, you're good.
Am I good?
Oh, yeah, you should be good.
Oh, I'm good. Okay. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to take a look at a picture such as this. This is the photo looking west to on the west side of Wausau. Some things on this picture may be familiar to you. This is another picture, a different, somewhat different picture, but it's really captures essences that I also want to talk about a little bit today. So I think the photographer maybe just walked down the hall or moved a little bit to capture this scene. Also, just so that you know, in postcard view, there's a colorized version, but we'll be talking mostly about the first two photos that I showed you here this afternoon. So where are we? So the pictures were taken from the old City Hall on Washington Street. The picture on your right is that City Hall, built a little bit after the time that Wausau became a city. So and this lasted for up until about 1912 when Wausau built another city. But again, looking west from that little dot on Washington Street, looking west. So if you're in the public library today, we don't have that City Hall there to compare the view with. But if you go to the public library today, look out one of those west windows, you'll see pretty much what this looks like today. And of course, you'll see some recognizable sites that we'll be talking about, a little bit of a closer view. I hope some of these scenes look familiar. The bridge is different, but there is something there that looks quite familiar to us even to this day. So, but before we move any further, if you would take a shot to the south from that same City Hall, you most likely would be taking a look at an industry that kept us going for a long time that Ben talked about last week, the great lumber industry. And this lumber industry, these sawmills, were of course carrying us through a good part of the 1800s, well into the 1900s. But I just didn't want to leave you without the sense that yes, that lumber was still an important part of this era in Wausau's history. So let's come back to this. So what do we see? Well, we see a train, a railroad coming, I think being pulling out, coming east out from the western reaches of Marathon County. This is the Green Bay Lakeshore and Western. And from here, it's going to head east through Hatley, Ringgold, Norrie into the Grand Junction at Eland, Wisconsin. So this is a train that started that went west from Wausau in 1880, but of course the railroads were here. The Chicago, the Wisconsin Valley line coming up from New Lisbon up going north was already here. Like I say, the Green Bay Lakeshore and Western came in the middle of the 1870s. and it was an important part of the transportation. This was the east-west line, carrying people from places east, then to go west into Minnesota via Marshfield and places west. So this is another shot of that same card, that same postcard. And one of the interesting things that I wanted to point out here was that there was a sleeper car. There was a side rail there that usually would have had a sleeper car attached, so people from Wausau could get on that evening railroad and either be going west or east out of the city of Wausau. So again, a major transportation link were these railroads coming north and south, east and west out of the city of Wausau. But these railroads were also important because they brought in the freight. Once they started to come into Wausau, this is what would eventually becoming the Chicago Northwestern Freight Office. The rail line would be quite parallel to this building. This was just off of Washington Street. But again, a very important part of bringing merchandise into the city as well as taking merchandise out of the city. Wausau's wood products and a variety of other things. Here you can see the merchants of Wausau lining up, waiting for the railroad to come in so that they can gather the merchandise off of the freight cars. An important part that railroading played in our history is it brought in people. The great migration of immigrants from Europe after the 1870s came in most likely by rail. And of course they came. Wausau's population doubled, maybe even some decades tripled, because of the great influx of people coming into Wausau and Marathon County to work in the sawmills, work in some of the factories, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. But again, it's the people that came into this city, came into this county by the rail. Before that, they had to depend on the river. They had to depend on maybe a rough trail coming up from Stevens Point. So this made it a lot easier for people to come into the city, settle, get a job, start to raise family, and start to make the city what it would be, which one may be called the golden age of the city of Wausau, which we'll talk about today and maybe even next week. So the rail also brought in people. This is a famous picture of Wendell Willkie campaigning, I believe, in 1944. But again, just the amount of people coming in to see him on the rail, the importance that rails played in our history is quite incredible. So a couple of maps at this point in time just showing a little bit of evidence of what was going on. The Chicago Northwestern coming up from the east, as well as the Milwaukee Road, and then they cross the river, moving into the western part of Marathon County, as well as going east on the west side of Wausau. So up serving the manufacturing plants in Wausau. Again, railroads a key part in moving people as well as moving products in and out of the city of Wausau. So another quick glimpse, we see the depot, the Chicago Northwestern Depot there. We see some type of a cart waiting for some kind of merchandise, most likely, with a little different view. We see the little wagon from the Hotel Bellas, most likely waiting for people getting off of the train they will get on the little wagon and then be taken to the Hotel Bellis, and you see other carts also being waiting for people to come. Again, a way of the people coming in and visiting hotel. Um, this depot was very important for that very service. Through the Chicago Northwestern drop service in the 1970s. Since then, the depot is still there. Of course, it has served many different functions since then. Rental place, a restaurant, bus depot at one time, and a variety of things. Today, it's still there, being renovated by the Chamber of Commerce. So, an historic landmark, again, serving that population, serving that railroad for many, many years. Another, just reminding you of what the picture looks like. So now let's take a look at the Island Hotel, which is across the street from the depot. The Island Hotel was built in 1911, serving the people coming off the train, visiting here in the city. The caption in the newspaper said he operated it until shortly after World War II, then sold it, and then in 1967 it was raised and purchased by the Woodson Foundation for in addition to the nickel hardware property next door. This was 1970 that it was starting to be considered for raising. Again, the Island Hotel, a very important part of the entertainment, of the restaurant history of the city, getting a little bit of an idea. 1940, serving chicken ham and T-bone dinners with all the trimmings for 50 cents. Sort of an idea of, in addition to an hotel itself, they also had a little restaurant. So part of the picture also, I just wanted to make sure that you notice the Wisconsin River. This was the west bank of the Wisconsin River, that serving the sawmills along the river, a very important part of our history. Of course, we have talked about the Wisconsin River and that importance for a variety of different times, but I just want you to know that as part of this photo, the Wisconsin River is there, right on the west side. Again, the picture of the falls, the Wisconsin River Falls, the Big Bull Falls coming down the Wisconsin River, pretty much parallel to Clark's Island. Here we have the picture again. Let's take a look and see. Well, now we're going to talk a little bit about this Curtis and Yale company on Clinton Street, this big factory started by Cornelius Curtis and the Curtis brothers out of Iowa, coming into Wausau in about 1880, building this wood products plant. They built doors, sashes, any kind of wood products that there were. They built it here. And at one time, the largest employer in the city of Wausau, Curtis, a very important part of the west side, a very important part of the manufacturing history of the city. And what Curtis also shows is the ability of other entrepreneurs in the city. The wood products industries really started to take off a lot during this time, a lot of entrepreneurs coming into the city. And of course, as part of the Curtis, it's the people. Here I found this picture of some of the workers at Curtis and Yale. Again, many years, 1880 through the early 1950s, a big part of employing a lot of people and putting a lot of people to work here in the city of Wausau. Um, so if we glance a little bit into the landscape, a little bit into the distant, you can see it there in the picture is Lincoln School. Lincoln School was one of those schools. This is on Fifth Avenue on the west side. Um, one of those schools that was built with the great increase in population in the city. Um, a wonderful building. I wish this building would still be here today. Um, but it was a symbol of the growth of the city of Wausau. So not only Lincoln, but Franklin School, a lot of other schools were being built in the later part of the 1800s, Irving, Longfellow, just demonstrating the great growth of the city of Wausau. And here we have Lincoln and Irving were the two West Side schools. Eventually, Grant School would be built um, into the early 1900s on the West Side. But again, Lincoln School serving the early needs of the young people on the West Side. Again, a wonderful solid building. Here they're getting ready for some tobogganing. If you notice, it was on a hill, so the kids really were able to take good advantage of the snow during the winter time for tobogganing. Looks like they're ready to go down the hill. This is a typical classroom at Lincoln School, and some more winter activities. As with most of the schools being built at this time, it was really built on the edge of the city. The school board and the city really placed these really on the edge of the city because they had confidence really in the growth of the city. They could see that the neighborhoods were starting to grow, and they placed these schools. When this school was built, Fifth Avenue was really on the edge of the city, and of course it continued to grow really a lot at this time. But again, the great structure of Lincoln School here on the west side, and here are the faculty. So again, a strong educational history that was started at this time in our Wausau's history. Again, woodworking, a variety of different topics that they were taught, but woodworking was a big part of it. Again, Lincoln School. So another shot of the landscape, a little bit of the western view. So we have something on what would become Stewart Avenue. You see Stewart Avenue there, and this building rising up on Stewart Avenue, which would come to be Trinity Lutheran Church on Stewart Avenue, built in 1909. One of the early churches coming to the west side. Trinity, as well as Grace, United Church of Christ today, are two of the early churches that were that came onto the west side because of the increased population, like we say, of the west side. This was a daughter church of Zion Lutheran Church on the east side. So this shot again, here we have this, a lot of different stories in this photo, taken during, I would say maybe 1890, somewhere around the turn of the century, featuring a lot of different stories that we want to tell you. And if one other story that we might talk about in the future chats will be the trolley. The trolley line is here. The tracks are laid. They're going to the west side. Eventually, these tracks would turn the bend at Third Avenue and go south. But again, which is evident that this picture was mostly taken around the early early parts of the 1900s. So again, the development of the West Side starting with this picture showing how Wausau was starting to grow onto the West Side, and a lot of different episodes with this picture. So with that, I turn it back to Ben. It was, these pictures just indicate, if you look at them, how Wausau was growing up. It was really a great part of the history of the city of Wausau. So we'll turn it back to Ben.
Yeah. There we go. Hey, that even works. Cool. Yeah, so there you go. There's the second picture that explains Wausau. Yeah.